Hello to everyone, and welcome to the first webinar organized by the Law and Business Group here at Newcastle University. Today, we have the pleasure of having with us Dr. Penelope or Penny Giosa. Dr. Giosa is a lecturer at the University of Reading, as well as a fellow of the George Washington Competition and Innovation Lab. She's also a member of the convener of the SLS Comparative Law Section and secretary of the British Association of Comparative Law. Penny holds a dual qualification as a non-practicing lawyer both in Greece and Cyprus. She has advanced her research through visiting fellowships at several institutions, including UCLA in the States, as well as Georgetown Law School and University of Oxford Institute of European and Comparative Law. During her time at Georgetown, she was supported by the prestigious American Bar Association section of antitrust law, international scholar in residence program. Her research focus is on the intersection of public procurement law, competition law, and economic crime. She also has an interest in state aid and the role of law in promoting sustainable development and mitigating climate change. So today, Penny will be presenting on her work in the area of public procurement and competition law, and in particular, today's presentation will be based on her recently published monograph, Competition Law and Collusion in Public Procurement. In the book, Penny utilizes auction theory as a benchmark to assess how the design of the EU public procurement system under the Public Sector Directive, the EU Public Sector Directive, creates vulnerabilities to potentially collusive practices. So I think without further ado, I will now pass to Penny. So Penny, you can start your presentation. A big thank you also for coming.
Thank you for the kind invite, and thank you for the introductories. I'm very glad, I'm delighted to be here with you today online to discuss a critical yet often overlooked challenge facing the European Union, and I'm talking about collusion in public procurement. So we all understand that public procurement is designed to ensure value for taxpayer money, but there is a silent crisis undermining this goal, and I'm talking about bid rigging. Let's look at the scale of the problem. Economists estimate that bid rigging inflates the price of public goods and services by over 10%, representing billions in wasted public funds. Public contracts are enormous, accounting for approximately 2 trillion euros annually, about 14% of the European Union's GDP. And when collusion happens, the public purse suffers immensely. Critically, the problem is getting worse. Why? Because a 2023 report by the European Court of Auditors flagged a disturbing trend. Competition for public contracts has been steadily declining over the last decade. And this highlights the urgency of our topic, the one we are discussing today. So how do we tackle that decline? We must stop viewing bid rigging purely as a matter for competition law enforcement after the fact. We need a strategy of deterrence through design. My research, as Iris mentioned, uses auction theory, a discipline rooted in economics and game theory, and this is my benchmark in my monograph. Auction theory analyzes the incentives and strategies of bidders in markets with competition. And the core argument of my work is that the design of the Directive 24 of 2014 creates structural loopholes that cartels exploit in order to stabilize monitor, and enforce their illegal agreements. So we need to fix the system itself. So let's begin with the initial stage, procurement planning, which involves preparatory activities like preliminary market consultation. Preliminary market consultations is a process where public authorities reach out to the market before launching a tender. The goal is to gather information, inform suppliers of future plans, and especially promote innovation. However, the directive gives authorities a lot of freedom on how to run these consultations, whether through open public sessions, matchmaking events, or private one-to-one meetings. While direct engagement saves time and effort, especially for complex or innovative projects, this flexibility creates two major vulnerabilities for bid rigging. Firstly, there is the risk posed by open and public sessions. When you gather all potential bidders in the same room, especially in small, highly specialized markets for complex or innovative projects, you are essentially giving them a formal channel for collusion. They get to see who their rivals are before the formal bidding starts. These public events allow incumbent established firms to identify new entrants or potential competitors. They gain time to either monitor these outsiders or even approach them directly to persuade them to merge or drop out, ensuring the cartel's survival. The meetings themselves provide the first opportunity for pre-auction discussions and alliances, which is a structural risk that simply cannot be fixed later by any auction design. Secondly, when consultations move into private, one-on-one discussions, the door swings open to corruption and undue influence. In the worst-case scenario, a corrupt procurement officer who may be influenced by bribes can selectively disclose confidential information to a favored bidder. This could include revealing the internal budget or even non-public details about another rival's proposal. This selective leak of information gives the favored firm a huge competitive advantage, allowing them to optimize their bid in order to win or to secure a contract based on an already formed collusive agreement. Furthermore, bidders may use this dialogue to unduly influence the technical specifications of the future tender, effectively manipulating the rules of the game. They suggest modifications to ensure their specifications align perfectly with their own products or services, thereby restricting and excluding other legitimate competitors. And believe me, what we are discussing is not just theory. According to a 2024 EU survey, 6 out of 10 companies consider this manipulation of specifications by bidders to be one of the most common corrupt practices in public procurement. So, to mitigate this, we must shift the focus to accountability and separation. Firstly, authorities need a clear, rigorous policy for conducting preliminary market consultations with mandatory checklists and detailed record keeping, outlining why they choose direct engagement. Secondly, and most importantly, we need a mandate for Chinese wall or functional separation between the procurement officers who conduct the market dialogue and the separate team that assesses the bids and awards the contract. This strict separation helps reduce the risk of corruption and prevent sensitive market information from leaking into the award decision. And now let's deal with the critical issue of division of lots. This is a completely different stage of the procurement procedure, and it is contemplated in Article 46 of the European Directive of 2014. And how this seemingly pro-SME policy can be actively exploited for bid rigging. Let me explain myself. The policy of dividing large public contracts into smaller lots was driven by a great objective: to boost small medium enterprises' participation and enhance competition. However, from an auction theory standpoint, this well-meaning policy may create a structural vulnerability that cartels can quickly exploit. I call this in my book the share the pie mentality. When a single contracting authority awards multiple lots, either simultaneously or sequentially, it allows incumbent economic operators to divide the total contract value among themselves, effectively running a bidding ring. So how does dividing contracts into lots facilitate bid rigging? Essentially in three ways. The first is about bid rotation and monitoring. When contracts are awarded sequentially, one lot after another, cartel members can identify any defections from the collusive agreement and react quickly in the next lot award. This repeat play allows cartels to monitor and enforce their illegal agreements immediately, strengthening in this way their stability. The second way is via cover bidding and package deals. The current directive allows for package bidding, where one firm can offer a single price for a combination of lots. This opens the door to cover bidding, where rivals intentionally submit high offers to ensure the designated winner secures all or most of the lots. So this creates the illusion of competition, but guarantees the cartel wins. And the third way is via subcontracting. Lots are often rigged using subcontracting arrangements as a payback or quid pro quo. A non-binding firm which agreed to stand down is rewarded with a lucrative subcontract from the winning cartel member. This keeps everyone happy and hides the collusion from the contracting authority. So the underlying problem here relates to pricing strategies when package bidding is allowed, and this leads to a direct conflict between the goals of competition and apparent value for money. The directive currently does not clarify if a bidder can offer a lower combined price for multiple lots than the sum of the prices for individual lots. But allowing this is what drives package bidding and is what favors large incumbents. A large firm can afford to make these below-cost combined bids in order to win the whole package. But what about small medium enterprises? This eliminates smaller medium enterprises competition. So if we allow this interpretation, we are prioritizing a short-term value for money benefit, which is slightly cheaper battle, over the long-term cost of a healthy competitive market that includes small medium enterprises. Therefore, the European legislator must explicitly reject the interpretation that allows a bidder to offer a lower combined price for bundled lots than the total sum of their individual lot prices. This measure must be taken to uphold the objective of involving small medium enterprises and to prevent incumbents from using illegal methods like side payments and blackmail to eliminate weaker rivals. And now let's talk about the significant collusion risks inherent in framework agreements, which are intended as efficient tools for aggregated procurement. A framework agreement, as defined in the directive, is essentially an agreement with one or more suppliers to establish the term for future contracts, known as call-offs, right, over a specific period. While framework agreements offer clear administrative convenience and cost effectiveness for repeat purchases, they contain a massive structural flaw. The most immediate problem is the closed system. What does this mean? Once the agreement is concluded, whether it is a single supplier framework contract or a multi-supplier one, new bidders are excluded for the entire duration. And I have to say that framework agreements typically run for 4 years and often longer in practice. So this exclusion creates a significant barrier to entry for the other market players. Why? Because due to the long duration of framework agreements, outside competitors cannot afford to be excluded from the public market for 4 or more years, leading them to abandon the market. I was talking about the lack of new competition, and that, as confirmed by auction theory, this is essential for a successful cartel to thrive whenever we don't have new marketplace players in the market. And because this fixed, limited membership creates a static, oligopolistic market, firms are instantly aware of their interdependence and the absence of external competition, which are also ideal conditions for a stable, thriving bidding ring. Also, we shouldn't forget that framework agreements have an average of 15 call-offs over their lifetime. Each call-off, and I'm talking about the secondary competition, the second round of competition between the members of the framework agreement. So each call-off provides a repeated opportunity for the fixed members of the cartel to signal prices, monitor each other's compliance with the collusive agreement, and enforce it quickly. So this constant interaction strengthens the bidding ring whenever there is a bidding ring, of course. Also, we should not forget that framework agreements aim to aggregate demand for homogeneous goods or services, like simple office supplies. Therefore, they often create a cost-symmetric bidding environment. But when suppliers are symmetric, agreeing on a collusive price is easy, making competition at the second stage almost purely price-driven, right? This is all what I'm talking about is auction theory. So given these pro-collusive features, we need strong design corrections. So my core recommendation, rooted in auction theory, is to mandate that framework agreements become open systems, not to retain them as closed systems. So framework agreements should allow new, non-incumbent economic operators to join during the framework's operational lifespan. But this entry should be triggered if there is price divergence, that is, a discrepancy between the prices agreed upon in the framework and the prices available to the contracting authority in the broader market outside the framework agreement. Otherwise, we would have significant delays, and this is not the reason why we want to have framework agreements, quite the opposite. So this mechanism would serve two vital purposes. It would maintain the administrative efficiency of the framework agreements while acting as a powerful instant incentive for incumbents to keep prices competitive at the call-off stage. If they overcharge, they should know that they will be able to invite, that contracting authorities will be able to invite new efficient bidders to disrupt the collusive environment. And now let's deal with the last part, focusing on the inherent risks of electronic auctions, specifically the transparency paradox, where too much information actually enables collusion. Electronic auctions were adopted to deliver efficiency, accountability, and savings, largely by removing human discretion. The directive mandates that authorities must communicate to all bidders at least sufficient information, often including real-time rankings, the number of participants, and the prices at which competitors drop out. This transparency, intended to ensure fairness, is the very thing that makes collusion so easy. Even with anonymous bidders, this excessive information flow creates three major vulnerabilities for bidding rings. First, the real-time data allows cartel members who know who is in their group to track the prices at which their co-conspirators bid or drop out. This instant, irrefutable evidence acts as the ultimate monitoring tool. It allows them to verify instantly if a member submitted a deliberately high bid or if someone is cheating the collusive agreement, the cartel, thereby reinforcing the cartel's stability. Secondly, the primary focus on awarding the contract solely based on the lowest price encourages simple, symmetric cartels. When bidders are competing only on a single, easily comparable metric like price, their underlying product value is similar. This symmetry makes it incredibly easy for the ring to agree on a common collusive scheme. Thirdly, e-auctions often occur in several consecutive phases. This multi-round format, combined with the real-time data, strengthens the cartel's enforcement mechanism. This means that any member of the cartel who deviates from the cartel can face immediate, albeit anonymous, retaliation in the very next phase of the auction, which severely deters cheating. So, to make e-auctions collusion-proof, authorities must eliminate the disclosure of real-time prices and rankings of anonymous rivals. It should be enough for a bidder to simply know if their bid is currently leading without seeing the precise price of the top bid. Also, we must pivot away from price-only awards. We need to prioritize the most economically advantageous tender criterion, MEET, as we call it in public procurement. By introducing complex technical or quality scores alongside price, we will create score heterogeneity. This makes it much harder for symmetric bidders to coordinate a simple price fix. Last but not least, we should embrace unpredictability. In auctions with few bidders, a predetermined closing time or a fixed number of phases is actually preferable over keeping the auction open indefinitely until the bidding stops. Why? Because this hard close method favors snipping. What is snipping? Strategic last-minute bidding that can enable cartel members to cheat each other, to deviate from the cartel. And this snipping should be favored over coordinated collusive strategies, thereby destabilizing the cartel. So in conclusion, my research shows that the most effective way to combat bid rigging is to stop relying exclusively on ex post enforcement, that is, trying to catch cartels after the fact. We must instead adopt a deterrence through design approach. I have identified 4 core structural loopholes in market consultation, lot division, framework agreements, and e-auctions that inadvertently enable and stabilize collusion. So to close these loopholes, we must systematically incorporate proven auction theory principles into the directive. And this is not just a theoretical exercise, it requires concrete, actionable steps like the recommendations I shared with you today. By shifting our focus to a system that deters collusion by design, we achieve two powerful outcomes. Firstly, we remove the structural safety net that allows cartels to thrive in the public sector. And secondly, we ensure that the 2 trillion euros spent annually by the European Union delivers the maximum value for money for our citizens and taxpayers. And that's all from me. Thank you for your time and attention.
I can start with a few questions. So I think the first question I had for you, well, reading a little bit because I didn't get the time to read it through, is about so agency theory was core in your analysis, right? So perhaps my question is, were there any limitations that from that theory you could extract in terms of recommendations on the design, I suppose, of the rules? So that's my question. If there are any limitations on that theory, in your view, of course. You need to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your question, Aris. That is an insightful, I would say, question. Well, actually, auction theory generally focuses on what? On maximizing economic efficiency, right? And there is always the optimal design aim suggested by auction theory that runs into practical hurdles regarding cost, right? Time and expertise. So recommendations, some of the recommendations that I made, I'm not sure whether could be easily adapted by procurement officers in specific member states of the European Union, especially from smaller public authorities that often lack expertise, resources, budget for such detailed analytical measures that I recommended in my monograph. Also, sometimes public authorities need to award contracts very quickly in case of emergencies. So conducting, for instance, market research to predict bidder numbers or implement sophisticated auction designs may cause delays in meeting public needs. I'm not sure if I have covered some of the points that may answer to your question. And also,
you have.
A last point that I want to say is that there is no a one-size-fits-all solution, meaning that a single optimal auction design does not exist, okay? And a design that works well for all procuring work might fail for purchasing, for instance, innovative technology or simple commodities. So these recommendations are very context-sensitive solutions applicable across all EU procurement actors. And this is why this is a challenge for the European policymakers, plus the fact that directives, if we still are going to have a directive and not a regulation after the recent effort of the European Commission to see how the current directives work and to see how they will go on from this stage. So the nature of the directive themselves allows flexibility, cannot introduce measures that are quite rigid and give strict instructions to European member states. And on the other hand, if we go for a regulation, as there are some speculations there will be a regulation instead of a directive, how can you put in a text all these guidelines, all these measures you want to you want the European measures to take without at the same time stopping them to be flexible, to have to exercise their discretion. After all, we shouldn't forget that procurement officers that don't have any discretionary power don't really care about their job. I mean, it's like cutting their wings, and they don't value anymore their role in the public authorities. So we have all these dilemmas and these, all these factors that we have to weigh. These may be some of the limitations of using auction theory in practice. If you would like to ask me something particular about.
Thanks, Penelope. So we have a question in the Q&A, if I can ask you that. So this is from Professor Ben Farrand. This question may be a little bit out of field, but he's interested to know the impact of geopolitics on Commission policy in various domains. So the question is, do you think that the increased emphasis of the Commission on competitiveness rather than competition is changing the approach to procurement, and particularly more in the way of tolerance of less than competitive behavior, so long as the firms awarded contracts are European?
I think this is a broader question. I think, it's a broader question than the emphasis of the book, of course. It kind of links also with recent developments at the EU level, looking at, for example, the state subsidies regulation, on which kind of has an application on procurement and mergers in particular. So I think, it's a broader question on the direction, I suppose, of public procurement at EU level, and perhaps an emphasis on favoring EU suppliers over suppliers from other countries, from third countries.
So, right. So if I understand well, the question is about the complex relationship between the European Union's focus on competitiveness versus competition in public procurement, and whether this new direction leads to a greater tolerance for cartels as long as European firms benefit. Is this correct? Do I understand this correctly?
I think so, yes. I mean, you can answer it from that angle as well, I suppose, which is a good one.
Right. Okay. I would say that yes, the increased emphasis on competitiveness means that public authorities are starting to tolerate a less competitive environment if they believe the lack of competition is necessary, right, to bring strong, stable European industrial capacity. But the risk, as I note in my monograph, is that this tolerance can be exploited by firms to engage in bid rigging, right? So my answer is that yes, and that the problem is that, after the buy European kind of mandate, lately, we can see that the EU wants to rely less on foreign suppliers, for critical goods, right? And sometimes these criteria favor established European companies, right, and make it harder for non-EU firms to win. And this, on the one hand, supports the EU geopolitical goal. On the other hand, it means that price competition is intentionally reduced. So thank you for this for this question, for giving the geopolitical dimension to this problem. So yes, I'm repeating myself. I would say that the answer is yes. And yes, this can definitely be exploited by firms in Europe to engage in bid rigging. Yes. That's actually, this is a very fascinating topic to write on, right? To have a paper on. I've never thought of that. this combination of the geopolitics and bid rigging. So thank you so much, Ben, if I may call you Ben, for this question. Hopefully, I tried to, I answered to some extent your question. It's a wholly new, world, I would say, that is worth further exploring for sure.
Can I ask a question, Penelope? You mentioned deterrence approach, like an approach for the cartels, like there should be not ex post investigation, but deterrence approaches. So, do you have any suggestions? Like, would you are you thinking things like leniency schemes or any incentive-based programs that you meant by this? Like, do you have any framework in mind for the deterrence? For the deterrence approach?
This is about the leniency program is about mostly about enforcement mechanism.
Yes.
So I indeed have a chapter in the monograph about leniency program and about private damages, and I'm more than happy to share the chapter with you, Niha. So my argument was that leniency programs should always take into account some mechanisms in public procurement, like the department mechanisms and self-cleaning measures. I'm not sure all of you are familiar with these terms, right? This is quite a complex topic. So let me say something. Just some basics. Whenever you report yourself in the context of the leniency program, right? It's like admitting that you did something illegal, right? So this information, this piece of information can be used by the contracting authority and say, we don't want to cooperate with you anymore. You will be out of the public market for a specific period of time. This is the department mechanism, right? If this does happen, you may, if you are a procurement officer, you may end up having not enough competition for your next public contract, especially if the market is narrow, right? So this is what I'm discussing in one of my chapters, how we can possibly balance leniency with some mechanism in public procurement that interacts in a quite complex way. Okay. Your question is about leniency program only, right?
No, any other deterrence approach that you were thinking of when you said that it shouldn't be exposed for cartels?
Right.
And you can focus on leniency. Yes, I would be interested to know any information on this.
Yeah. What I suggested, I recommended in my book, is that the first theme, we all know the first theme that reports itself to the competition authority about a cartel has amnesty, right? They cannot have any fines, and because they were the first whistleblowers. And what I recommended is that the other themes cooperating with the competition authority should also have this possibility, right? Not to be punished by being away from the public market for the specific period of time contemplated in the directive. Other than that, another measure to deter bid rigging, to enforce competition in case of bid rigging, is to, let me think about it, don't quite remember well. It's a measure adopted by the United States of America. I also recommended the liquidated damages clause in the tender documents and the final contract. So what is this about? This is a clause that will stipulate a fixed lump sum of money, let's say 15% of the contract value, that the supplier must pay if a breach of competition law occurs, if there is an infringement of competition law like bid rigging. And what I said in my monograph is that there is a benefit here. What's the benefit? The public authority is relieved of the enormous expense and burden of proving, right, the actual loss and calculating the overcharge in court, because we usually have to, public officers usually have to collect evidence and prove and say how much they were charged in excess of the price they had to pay for in the absence of a cartel. So if we include in the contract, in the public contract, a clause like this, the liquidated damages clause, that would be great. That would save time and effort, right?
Yeah.
But there is a challenge here as well. Always there are challenges. The clause must be legal, right, and enforceable. This is contract law now.
Yeah, that was my next question, that how would it be enforceable? So that was my answer. But yeah, this is quite an interesting approach to that. So one would be lenient, so that is a separate part. But within the contract, liquidate, yeah, that's quite an interesting aspect to it. But the enforceability, yes, that would be
some jurisdictions may think that this is a penalty doctrine clause, right?
Yes.
And not all of us in the EU accept clauses like that. They think they punish. They are penalties. Yeah. So some courts may reject the clause if they find. Yeah.
For others, they can buy the book, Penelope. So we can, can go and buy the book.
That's very true. Yeah. So again, a big thank you to Penelope, to Penny for making us the honor, for doing us the honor of being the first really presenter in what we hope to be a series of webinars